Luke Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead as he tightened the last bolt on the docking ring. The station was busy, with ships arriving and leaving every few minutes. Bright lights from the docking bay reflected off the metal walls, and the sound of engines thrumming filled the air. He liked the work. It was simple. It made sense, and it kept his mind focused. He looked up and noticed a group of tall figures approaching. They moved with grace and authority. At the center was a young alien in a long silver robe. Her skin shimmered with soft blue patterns, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Luke had seen aliens before, but this one seemed different. There was a kind of presence about her, a way she carried herself that demanded attention. She stopped abruptly in front of him, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. Luke stepped aside to let her pass. He expected a nod, or maybe a gesture of thanks, but instead, she stared at him. "You dare stand in my path?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying an edge of command. Luke blinked. "I'm just fixing the docking ring. I didn't mean to block you." The alien's eyes narrowed. "You must show respect. I am Princess Illyra of the Varhani Empire. You will step aside properly." Luke smiled slightly, though he did not bow. "Humans do not follow your customs. I am not disrespecting you. I am doing my job." Her expression changed from anger to confusion. No one had spoken to her like that before. Most beings either bowed, shouted, or ran away. This human simply continued his work while answering her calmly. "How dare you speak to me in such a manner?" she said, though her voice trembled slightly, betraying surprise. "I'm not daring," Luke said. "I'm just speaking truth. This is a human way. It does not mean I disrespect you." The guards behind her shifted nervously. They whispered to each other, clearly offended. One of them stepped forward. "You will apologize, human, or face consequences." Luke shook his head. "I have nothing to apologize for. I will not lie to avoid punishment." Illyra's eyes widened. She had never met a being so fearless. Curiosity replaced her anger. She tilted her head slightly and studied him. "Are all humans like this?" she asked. "Most of us," Luke replied. "Some are braver. Some are more careful. We all have our ways. Yours is different. And I respect it in its own place. I hope you can respect mine." The princess paused. She had expected a fight, or at least submission. Not words spoken with such quiet confidence. She glanced at the guards. They looked shocked, unsure of how to react. "Very well," she said finally. "You may continue. But remember this meeting. It will not be forgotten." Luke nodded. He returned to his work, but his mind was not entirely on the docking ring. He glanced at the princess once more and wondered what had brought her here. She did not seem like someone who would travel far from her home without reason. As he worked, he noticed the whispers among the humans and aliens nearby. Most were talking about the princess and the human who had dared to speak to her calmly. Some were admiring his courage. Others were angry that a human had offended royalty. Luke ignored them. He had learned long ago that attention often brought trouble. After a few minutes, the princess moved closer again. Luke straightened up, expecting another confrontation. Instead, she said quietly, "You fixed the docking ring quickly." It was impressive. He looked at her in surprise. "Thank you. I just did my job." "Few would have done it so calmly," she said. "Humans are strange creatures." Luke smiled. "We are. Just like your people are strange to us. But maybe that makes us interesting to each other." Illyra studied him. She had expected fear, anger, or confusion, but not this. He was calm, kind, and yet fearless. It unsettled her, but it also drew her in. She wanted to know more about him, about humans, about why they could act with such quiet strength. Suddenly, an alarm blared across the station. A small shuttle was approaching too fast for docking. Luke ran to check the control panel. The computer indicated a mechanical failure in the guidance system. If not corrected, the shuttle would crash into the docking bay. "Get out of the way!" Luke shouted as he worked. Sparks flew from the control panel as he rerouted power and manually adjusted the docking clamps. Illyra watched in shock. She had never seen anyone act so quickly under pressure, especially not a human. Within moments, the shuttle slowed and docked safely. Crew members scrambled out, thanking Luke for preventing disaster. Illyra stood frozen, feeling a strange mix of admiration and confusion. She had intended to teach this human a lesson in respect, but instead, he had saved lives without a thought for himself. You saved them," she said quietly. "I saved them because it was the right thing to do," Luke replied. "It doesn't matter who they are. Everyone deserves to live." Her eyes softened slightly. She had not expected such simple honesty. In her world, politics and rank always came before truth and fairness. Yet here was a human who valued life above everything else. The station commander, a tall human named Robert, approached. "Good work, Luke. That was quick thinking. You handled it better than our safety protocols." Luke shrugged. "I just did what had to be done." Illyra studied him for a long moment. She wanted to speak more, to ask questions, to understand why humans were different. But the crowd around them grew, and her guards whispered urgently. "Princess, we must leave," one of them said. She hesitated, looking back at Luke. "Very well," she said, her voice quiet but thoughtful. She turned and followed her entourage, her curiosity lingering. Luke returned to his tools, but he could not stop thinking about her. She had been so proud, so confident, and yet she had shown a flicker of something else, a desire to understand, to see beyond what her advisors told her. He wondered if he would meet her again. Over the next few hours, rumors spread quickly across the station. Some aliens whispered about the human who had dared to speak to a princess. Humans shared stories of the alien royal, who had shown respect for skill and courage, even if she did not fully understand it. Luke ignored the attention. He knew that fame and gossip could cause trouble. He focused on his work and kept moving, steady and calm as ever. Later that day, Illyra found herself wandering near the docking bay again. She watched the humans working, their simple tools and methods, yet effective and precise. She remembered Luke's calm face, his quiet strength, and the way he had saved the shuttle. She felt something she had never felt before: respect for a human, not just for their skills, but for their character. "Why does he not fear me?" she asked one of her guards. "Because humans are not like us," the guard replied. "They do not care for rank as we do. They act from their own rules." Illyra nodded slowly. She liked that. It was strange, yes, but also refreshing. She wanted to see more of this human, to understand him, to see if his calmness could survive the chaos of her world. As the sun of the nearby star dipped below the horizon, casting orange light over the station, Illyra returned to her quarters. She could not stop thinking about Luke. She realized that this human, so simple in appearance, had left a mark on her mind. He had shown bravery, intelligence, and calmness in a way that no Varhani had ever done. Luke, meanwhile, finished his work for the day. He packed his tools and prepared to rest. He felt the same sense of curiosity about her. Though he knew little of her world, he understood one thing clearly. The universe was bigger and stranger than he had imagined. And somehow, chance had brought them together. The story of the human and the alien princess had just begun, and neither of them knew how far it would go. One calm step, one respectful word, and a chance encounter had started a chain of events that could change both human and Varhani history forever. As the lights dimmed in the docking bay, Luke walked away from his work, calm as ever. Somewhere, in her quarters, Illyra stared out at the stars, thinking of the human who had crossed her path and had not faltered. The first spark of curiosity had ignited, and neither would forget the encounter. The next morning, Luke Carter returned to the docking bay. The station was quieter than usual, with only a few ships moving in and out. He checked the systems and tightened a few bolts, making sure everything was secure. The previous day's events had not slowed him down. He focused on his work, calm as ever, though a small part of his mind kept thinking about the princess. Illyra, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about him either. In her quarters, she reviewed the reports from her guards and advisors. Most of them were angry about the human's behavior, calling it disrespectful. Some suggested that he be punished, or at least closely watched. Illyra did not respond. She could not forget how he had spoken calmly, without fear, and how he had saved lives without thinking of reward. She felt a strange admiration growing in her. Later in the day, the station commander called Luke to the control room. A small human transport had reported a strange signal near the edge of the station's sector. The signal interfered with docking systems, and several ships had narrowly avoided accidents. Luke studied the readings. The signal was irregular, unlike anything he had seen before. "What do you think it is?" asked Commander Robert. "I'm not sure," Luke replied. "It could be a malfunction, or it could be something external. We need to investigate carefully." As he worked on analyzing the signal, Illyra arrived in the control room with her guards. She did not expect to see Luke again so soon. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him calmly studying the screens. "You again," she said, her voice carrying a mix of irritation and curiosity. "Princess," Luke said politely, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I am responsible for the safety of this sector," she replied. "And it seems your work is required again." They worked in silence for a few minutes, both focused on the readings. The signal continued to fluctuate, sending bursts of interference that threatened to disable docking systems. Luke traced the origin to a small satellite drifting near the edge of the station. It had no identification markings, no signal of ownership. It was clearly artificial, but unlike any human or Varhani design. "This is strange," Luke said aloud. "It does not belong to us. It might be a third party trying to cause trouble." Illyra leaned over his shoulder to look at the data. "A third party?" she asked. "You mean someone wants to create a problem between humans and Varhani?" "It's possible," Luke said. "Someone could be trying to make us fight each other while they stay hidden." Her eyes narrowed. She had seen such schemes in her empire before. "We cannot let that happen," she said firmly. "We must find the source and stop it." Luke nodded. "I agree. But we need to act carefully. One wrong move, and it could start a real accident." The station commander agreed to allow both humans and Varhani scientists to investigate. Luke and Illyra were paired together, each representing their people. It was unusual for a human and a Varhani royal to work so closely, but the danger left no choice. They moved to the lower sectors, where the satellite signal was strongest. The corridors were dimly lit, and the air smelled faintly of ozone from the station's power systems. Illyra's guards followed, tense and ready, but Luke walked calmly, adjusting his toolkit as he went. "You seem very calm," Illyra said after a moment. "Even with all this danger, calmness helps me think," Luke replied. "Panicking never solves anything. I focus on what I can do, not what I fear." Her eyes softened. She had expected humans to be afraid, to react with anger or hesitation, but Luke's calm presence made the situation easier to face. She realized that his strength was not in power or rank, but in patience and steady thinking. They reached the docking area where the satellite had drifted close. It was a small object, no larger than a human van, with glowing lines across its surface. Luke approached carefully, scanning it for energy readings. Illyra observed silently, impressed by his methodical approach. "It is active," Luke said. "But it does not seem hostile right now. The interference is controlled remotely. Someone is using it to create confusion." Illyra frowned. "Someone wants us to blame each other." "Exactly," Luke said. "We need to disable it without touching the control system directly. It could trigger an explosion if mishandled." He opened his toolkit and began rewiring a small access port. Illyra watched him work, Noting how he handled the delicate wires with steady hands, the guards remained cautious, ready to act, but Luke did not seem worried. After several tense minutes, he finished his adjustments. The satellite powered down safely, and the interference stopped. The docking systems returned to normal, and the danger was gone. Illyra let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "You did it," she said. "You handled it without fear. Most would panic or attack blindly." "I just stayed calm and thought about the problem," Luke replied simply. "That is all it takes sometimes." For a moment, they stood quietly, looking at the disabled satellite. Illyra felt a sense of respect for him, growing stronger. She had expected arrogance, fear, or weakness. But Luke had shown none of these. Instead, he had shown intelligence, patience, and courage. As they walked back to the control room, the station began to buzz with news of their success. Humans and Varhani alike were impressed that the problem had been solved without anyone being harmed. Whispers about the unusual human and the alien princess began to circulate again. "You are gaining quite a reputation," Illyra said, a small smile on her face. Luke shrugged. "I am just doing my work. The reputation does not matter to me." "It should matter," she said softly. "You are showing that humans are capable of more than most of my people realize. Your calmness, your strength, it is remarkable." He looked at her, surprised by her honesty. "Thank you. That means a lot. Coming from you." The rest of the day passed quietly. Luke returned to his engineering tasks, repairing minor malfunctions and checking systems. Illyra observed him from a distance, curious about how he could remain so composed despite the pressures around him. She thought about the human way of life, different from Varhani customs, yet effective in ways her people could not fully understand. Later, while Luke worked, she approached him again. "Why do humans value calmness so much?" she asked. "Because it helps us survive," Luke said. "Panic clouds, judgment. Calmness lets us see clearly and act correctly. Sometimes, the quiet approach is stronger than force." Illyra considered his words. In her empire, power and authority often decided outcomes. Strength came from weapons, influence, or fear. Luke's way was different, and she realized that it could be stronger in ways she had never considered. That evening, as the station's lights dimmed and ships settled into quiet docking, Illyra returned to her quarters. She watched the stars through a large window, thinking of Luke. She realized that she wanted to understand more about humans, about their strength and their calmness. She had expected to be frustrated or angry with him, but instead, she felt intrigued and even a little respect. Luke, meanwhile, finished his work for the day. He packed his tools and prepared to rest, unaware that he had left a strong impression on the young alien princess. He had done his job as always, quietly, calmly, without thought of reward or recognition. But the universe had other plans. Someone, somewhere, was watching the station. The small satellite had been only a test, a warning. There were forces that did not want humans and Varhani to work together. Forces that thrived on misunderstanding and conflict. Luke and Illyra were unaware, but their quiet teamwork had already drawn attention. As night fell, the two of them, in their separate quarters, thought about the day's events. One was calm and methodical, the other curious and reflective. The encounter between human and alien princess had begun to change more than just their thoughts. It had begun to shift the possibilities of peace, cooperation, and understanding between their species. In the silence of the station, Luke slept peacefully, unaware of the challenges ahead. Illyra gazed at the stars, her mind alive with questions. The spark of curiosity had been lit, and neither human nor princess could ignore the potential of what their partnership might become. The next days would bring more tests, more challenges, and more chances for them to prove that calmness, courage, and quiet strength could overcome fear, suspicion, and even danger. The station, the people, and perhaps the galaxy itself were about to see the beginning of something new. And through it all, Luke walked calmly, and Illyra watched him with growing admiration, unaware of how much her own world would change because of one simple human who refused to bow in fear. Several days passed after the satellite incident. The station had returned to its normal rhythm. But Luke, Carter, and Princess Illyra could not ignore the feeling that something was wrong. Small errors appeared in docking schedules, some systems glitched without explanation, and whispers of sabotage began to circulate among both human and Varhani crew. Luke was busy checking every system he could find. He moved methodically, carefully inspecting power grids, life support systems, and docking computers. Every problem he discovered seemed minor at first, but a pattern began to emerge. Someone was tampering with the station. And the signs pointed to more than just random mistakes. Illyra joined him again, insisting that they work together. The guards followed reluctantly, wary of letting a human so close to a princess again. But Illyra ignored their protests. She trusted Luke's calm and steady presence more than the words of her advisors. "These glitches are too frequent to be accidents," Luke said, examining a control panel. "Someone wants to create panic or force an argument between humans and Varhani. It is deliberate." Illyra frowned. "Why would someone want that? Our people are already suspicious of each other. It could start a real conflict." "Exactly," Luke said. "And if we do not find the cause, it could get worse. We need to act carefully and quickly." They traced the interference to several key points in the station. Some systems had been altered to fail at critical moments, and small but dangerous changes had been made to life support and docking programs. Luke worked with precision, repairing the systems, while Illyra observed, learning how he approached each problem. She was impressed by his focus and patience. "You never panic," she said at one point. "Even when the station could be in real danger. You stay calm." "Panic doesn't solve anything," Luke replied. "Thinking clearly does. That is all humans try to do when faced with danger." Illyra nodded slowly. She realized that calmness was not just a personality trait for him. It was a tool, a strength that could influence others and keep them safe. She had seen many leaders panic or act impulsively, and she knew that Luke's approach could save more lives than force or authority alone. As they moved deeper into the station, a sudden explosion shook the lower levels. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed. Smoke filled the corridors. Luke grabbed Illyra's arm and pulled her behind a bulkhead for cover. "Stay close," he said calmly. "We need to move slowly and watch for danger." The explosion had come from a storage room near the engineering sector. Luke peered around the corner. A small fire burned, and smoke rose in thick clouds. He pulled a portable extinguisher from his pack and quickly put out the fire. Illyra watched silently, astonished by how efficiently he acted. "It was meant to scare us," Luke said. "Or worse. Someone wants us to react without thinking." Illyra clenched her fists. "We cannot let them succeed. We need to find the person responsible." They followed the pattern of sabotage deeper into the station. Luke noticed small clues left behind. Wires cut in a strange way, minor changes to computer programs, and unusual energy readings. Each clue told him that the saboteur was skilled, careful, and familiar with both human and Varhani technology. "This is not a simple criminal," Luke said. "They know how to manipulate both our systems. They want to create a war between us." Illyra's eyes narrowed. "We cannot let that happen. The Varhani Empire could take drastic action if they believe humans are attacking." They continued moving through the station, carefully avoiding guards and patrols who had been misled to think the sabotage was human-made. Luke led Illyra through maintenance tunnels and quiet corridors, using his knowledge of the station's design to stay ahead of potential dangers. "You know this place well," Illyra said. "How do you find your way so easily?" "I pay attention," Luke replied. "Every station has patterns. Every corridor has logic. Once you see it, you can move safely and quickly." As they approached the central control hub, they discovered signs of recent activity. The saboteur had accessed the main computer systems, leaving behind traces that were difficult to erase. Luke studied the data carefully. "They were here recently," he said. probably watching to see what we would do. They might still be on the station. Illyra nodded. Then we need to act before they strike again. They set a careful plan. Luke would disable the remaining tampered systems, while Illyra observed and reported any suspicious movement. The guards waited nearby, unaware of the full plan but ready to intervene if necessary. Hours passed as Luke worked, repairing systems, analyzing energy signatures, and checking for hidden threats. Illyra noticed how methodical and patient he was. Each step was deliberate, each action precise. She realized that his calmness was not just strength, it inspired confidence in everyone around him. Humans have a way of staying steady, she said quietly, even when things seem impossible. Luke looked up at her. It is not that we are fearless. We just try not to let fear control us. Calm thinking leads to better decisions. She considered his words. In her empire, fear and pride often dictated actions, and mistakes were common. Luke's way was different, and she felt a growing admiration for him. As night fell, the station lights dimmed, but Luke continued his work. Suddenly, a warning light flashed. A hidden corridor nearby indicated movement. Luke signaled Illyra to follow him quietly. They moved down the corridor, keeping low. The shadows were deep, and the hum of the station masked most sounds. Luke led them to a small maintenance room where they found the saboteur attempting to escape with stolen data. Stop right there, Luke said calmly. You cannot take that. The saboteur turned, startled. It was a human-looking figure, but his suit and tech were unfamiliar. He raised a small weapon, but Luke did not move quickly to attack. He kept his hands free and his eyes steady. I suggest you put that down, Luke said. We can handle this without violence if you cooperate. Illyra stepped forward, her presence commanding. You are caught, she said. Do not make it worse for yourself. The saboteur hesitated. He had expected panic, fear, or resistance, but not this calm, controlled approach. Luke's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. The quiet courage unnerved him. Finally, the saboteur dropped the weapon. Luke carefully restrained him while Illyra contacted the station security. The guards arrived, surprised to see the saboteur captured so calmly. They took him away without further incident. Illyra turned to Luke. You did not even flinch, she said. You faced danger without fear. Luke shook his head. I am not fearless. I just stay calm and think clearly. That is enough to survive. She smiled, a small, sincere expression. Humans may be stronger than I thought. Not because of weapons or status, but because of patience and quiet courage. Over the next hours, they secured the station and restored all systems. The sabotage had been serious, but Luke's careful work and calm approach had prevented disaster. The humans and Varhani were grateful, and whispers of admiration for the strange human and the young princess began to spread. As they walked through the quiet station, Illyra realized that her understanding of humans had changed. Luke was not just a worker. He was a symbol of a different kind of strength, one that relied on calm thinking, courage without arrogance, and quiet determination. You make it seem easy, she said. It is not easy, Luke replied. It just works if you keep calm and think step by step. Rushing only makes mistakes worse. Illyra nodded. She felt a new respect for him, one that went beyond curiosity. She realized that humans like him could change the way her people saw the universe. That night, as the station settled into silence, Illyra gazed out at the stars from her quarters. She thought about Luke, about his calmness, his courage, and the quiet strength that had saved lives. She wondered what other lessons humans could teach her if she took the time to understand them. Luke, in his quarters, cleaned his tools and prepared for rest. He felt the same sense of curiosity about the princess, but kept his focus on the work. He knew challenges would come again, but he was ready. Calmness and steady thinking were his allies, and they had carried him this far. Outside the station, in the shadowed sectors, unseen observers watched the events unfold. They had hoped the sabotage would create war, but the humans' calm courage had prevented disaster. The quiet strength of one person had changed the outcome. Illyra and Luke had begun to see the value of cooperation, respect, and patience. Their encounter had started something larger than either of them realized. The station was safe for now, but the universe had more challenges ahead, and one calm human and one curious alien princess were ready to face them together. The bond formed in these days would grow, built not on fear or pride, but on respect, understanding, and quiet courage. And the story of the human and the young alien princess was only beginning to unfold.